You hear this all the time where you should hold a stock for forever and that investors that hold for the long term are the absolute winners. Well, yeah, a part of that is true, but what's missing from the argument and where is the danger here? Let's go ahead and break it down. I don't believe that there is a such thing as a forever stock. And that is because, one, forever is a mighty long time, but also things change. And things can change sometimes within 5 to 6 years, but definitely over the decades. I have a few examples to really hammer that point home. A company today that you think could be absolutely invincible and that has all the advantages today may have it for the next 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years or more, but sometimes there are new technologies and new things that will erase the existence of that company or make it a lot less valuable over the long term. So for example, let's go back to the early 2000s. In the early 2000s, what was the most valuable company? Now right now, you probably think of Apple as the most valuable company right now. Not the case in 2000s. The most valuable companies back then were ExxonMobil, AT&T, Citigroup, and Walmart. Nobody really lists any of those companies as the best stocks to invest right now. And that was just in the last 20 years. And that's not to say those stocks are terrible or that they will lose you money. The AT&T absolutely would have, and Citigroup also would have lost you some money too by now. After 22 years now, you would have lost money in at least two of those stocks I just mentioned. But back then, they were considered to be invincible. If you go back and look at some of those early articles in the early 2000s about how ExxonMobil is basically what Apple is now, people thought ExxonMobil was invincible. But what happened? Right after 2007, 2008, the world started to shift and we started to move way more into the technology space. Then you got companies like Tesla. Then you started seeing companies like Ford and GM start to produce electric cars, which kind of drew down the value of a company like ExxonMobil. But also, we just started focusing on tech. Amazon went from bottom of the basement in the early 2000s to being one of the most valuable companies on earth in just 20 some years. That's it. Today is Google's 25th birthday, and it is on the list of the most valuable companies that did not really exist not that long ago, right? We're talking 2 decades, and the game has absolutely changed. Now, should you own companies for the long term? Yes, you absolutely should. But as much as I love holding Google, I love holding Apple, y'all know how Microsoft is still one of my favorite stocks. I don't know if 10 or 20 years from now, that's going to be the case. And what I'm not going to do is marry myself to those stocks and just stay with it just because I read it in a book or just because Warren Buffett said it. Is Warren Buffett smart? Yes. Is he really good at what he does? Yes. But when the business changes, and if it does, you have to be able to change with it. So what is the best way to look at this? I've been saying this almost every week, at least on this channel. What I do is have a rolling evaluating period. So every year I'll come back and say, look, I think this about Microsoft. Oh, it's still valid? All right, so we'll go into the next year and just come back and check in on things as opposed to set it and forget it and never come back and look at it again. I can think of companies like Blockbuster. What if you thought that Blockbuster, and it's hard to see that now, but in the early 2000s, what if you invested in something like Blockbuster and said, this is my forever stock? And then something like Netflix comes along and absolutely changes the entire field. This stuff starts to happen all the time, and it could be happening right now with artificial intelligence, where we're going to get new products and new services that were unfathomable just 2 years ago. No one could have told me that there would have been a computer program that could spit out content and scripts and do all these types of things in seconds, and it was going to be free, and it could be something that could replace the search engine. It's just not something that was on many people's radar, but here we are, right? So even though there are great companies now and that you should invest in for the long term, I'm not trying to tell you not to invest in the long term. What I am saying is don't be blind and don't get married to these stocks, okay? You need to set up a time. I would prefer every year at least, or every 6 months, where you come back and just reevaluate and just make sure that your hypothesis is still valid. You don't want to be stuck in something like an AT&T that was one of the best companies to invest in ever in the early 2000s, one of the most valuable companies on the face of the earth, and now is nowhere to be found. And the same thing for ExxonMobil. I could argue the same thing for Walmart, though Walmart has been modest. But think of it. Walmart, Amazon. two completely different companies. One of those was born in the last 20 years. So 20 years from now, what is going to be that next big thing? Perhaps it's been invented yet, perhaps it hasn't, but what I'm telling you to do is keep your eyes open, look for those new opportunities, and don't just stay stuck in a particular decade or a particular area just because you felt like you were supposed to. So always keep your options open. Always look for good investing opportunities. Now, if you're looking for some more opportunities, I've got some for you. This is the video that you need to check out next.